Hello. Thank you very much for coming. I remember delivering a speech about using buildings as virtual power plants at Verge London in 2012. Not much changed since then. Since then, I've set up a company that was the first ever to have BBA accreditation to use robots on the building site. I've set up another company that is the first to ship every single building services product that connects online the moment it is connected. But I still think this is big. Using buildings as virtual power plants is a fantastic opportunity, and it's growing bigger every year the more renewables we add to the grid. Bear with me, I'll explain. So what does decarbonizing grid or decarbonizing heat mean in practice? Okay, the government has this plan to move us away from gas over the next 10 to 15 years. Okay, that means that on the domestic level, most people will probably end up with a heat pump of sorts. I mean, there's been talk about pumping hydrogen down the grid, but this is like 50 years away or something like this. So heat pumps is the solution that we will probably end up sticking with. Now, there are practical implications of that. First of all, heat pumps are not cheap. When you compare that to a gas boiler, it's a lot more expensive to actually buy. Yeah? On top of that, some of the heat pumps are also a lot more complex to install. If you think about ground source heat pumps, it's a big deal. Okay? Even when it comes to air source heat pump, it's still a chunky equipment you need to put outside. In some areas you need planning permission for this. It can be noisy, your neighbors might hate you for it, and so on. Okay, so there are practical implications. On top of that, even assuming a COP of, in winter, 2 to 3, it's more expensive to use than gas. Okay, because electric heating is, well, electricity is 4 times more per kilowatt hour than gas, and heat pumps are not yet as efficient as we would like. So more expensive to buy, more complex to install, and more expensive to use. Sounds like a brilliant plan, doesn't it? On a large scale, as mentioned before by Hugh, they will have significant impact on the grid. Okay, because we will be less able to control when we're actually feeding electricity into the grid, whereas heat pumps will have a rather predictable demand. Okay, people get cold in winter, therefore they use more of it. We generally have less renewables in winter because the sun doesn't shine so much. So it will create complex issues on a larger scale. On top of that, our grid is capable of handling a certain amount of electricity. The more we want to consume and the more we want to generate, the more green reinforcement we will have to put in. And some estimates put it at £200 billion to upgrade the grid in order to be able to decarbonize heat and decarbonize transport. That's not small change. Okay, so we're looking at a number of implications, both on a small scale for each user and also on a large scale when it comes to the infrastructure. Now, in order for it to happen, in order for the low carbon heat to take place, it needs to deliver value. And at the moment, the jury is out, okay? So what are we going to do? We're going to look at subsidies or incentives. Well, that's never been particularly reliable. Many people here lost businesses because they were relying on some sort of subsidy or incentive lasting, and we know the government's changed and the priorities change. So not something that we can build a long-term strategy on. Well, how about changing user behavior? There's been a lot of talk over the last 5 years about changing user behavior. And then we realized that actually as we retrofit homes, people tend to like staying warmer. Okay, and the whole user behavior science ended up being a little bit unworkable. Yeah, we started realizing there's a pre-bound effect, there's a rebound effect, there are all sorts of things that happen. We can't just tell people what to do and expect them to do it. So probably not the best idea. Okay, well, how about efficiency through innovation? Okay, does that have legs? Well, we might be able to if we innovate our way away from higher capital cost, higher electricity cost, and sort of bigger problems for the grid. That might work, but what does it mean? A new business model. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we still purchase our electricity pretty much like we used to purchase coal. You know, we pay for what's delivered, okay? And when it's damped, that's what we pay for. Whether that's a, you know, cubic feet, you know, of coal or kilowatt hour of electricity, same thing, okay? Maybe it's time to rethink it a little bit. So let me concentrate, since a lot of that has been covered, let me concentrate on the last 2 points. What can technology do? Okay, well, we've already seen companies trying to put our boilers online. I mean, everybody's heard of Nest. Most of us heard of Hive or Switchy, you know. So putting boilers online and being able to get the data onto some sort of a cloud and possibly optimize it from there and then send some instructions back to the boiler is a good starting point. I think we need to go a lot further. I think we need to go the way of full integration of all of the building services together so they work as one. And that means ventilation, that means heating, that means hot water, that means cooling. Because people want that too. And if people want that, they'll get it, okay? And the moment we integrate it all into one system, we can actually control the whole thing as one. We can start optimizing, okay? Now, we've been talking about IoT for a number of years. We can get sensors, we can put sensors everywhere, we can get data from those sensors. And with that data, we can start building intelligent systems, because the moment the system knows that every day at that particular time people need this much hot water, the system can predict for that and can actually just deliver that. What's needed, as opposed to keeping a hot water tank hot all the way long, so you lose energy as it needs to be regularly reheated, you can do something which is very demand specific. Okay? But we need a lot of sensors and we need a lot of intelligence, because that demand is different in each and every household. So we need systems that can learn from each particular household what is the particular demand profile, what's occupancy pattern like. Yeah? I mean, people might need different temperature in different rooms because different people will feel comfortable at different temperatures. Again, that's important for the system to actually get the data and then be able to implement the actions. Once the systems are online and you collect all the data, you can use machine learning in aggregate to actually build some decent predictability, build some decent operational parameters, and then dump them back on the system so each system can optimize continuously. With systems being online and in aggregate, you can also use things like tariff matching or switching, because again, if you know exactly the user profile, you know at what point they want their heat and at what point they use their water, you can actually look at what tariff is available or what tariff is best for them at the time. You can optimize this again, okay? With smart meters, that's becoming a possibility. And if you roll out lots of systems that are connected, you can start building virtual heat networks, which means that you can have 1,000 or 10,000 homes acting as one, yeah? And that means a lot, because you can start optimizing what happens on the grid, whether that's frequency response or load shifting or anything else, or the cost of electricity, and use it to your advantage. And when you do that, you drive value, okay? You can add value to consumers, you can derive value from that. So this can start building new business models. So I think we've been talking about selling comfort as opposed to selling kilowatt hours for some time, but we've never managed to nail what comfort is. And I think the reason for that is because comfort is when we stop thinking about it. But then when you stop thinking about it, how do you define that you stop thinking about it? So I think the idea of building services is to deliver comfort to the point that the users actually don't ever have to think about it, okay? Because when they don't have to think about it, that means they've got no problems. It's not too drafty, it's not too cold, it's not too hot, yeah? The water is just right. Okay? But in order to do that, you need a lot of sensors, you need a lot of intelligence on the system. Okay? So can you actually sell heat as service? Yeah? How is that possible? How could that work? Yeah? Or comfort as service? So this is something that requires a little bit more thinking, and I'm sure people like British Gas looking into the barrel of history, looking at degasification of grid, might start thinking about that too. You could do lots of things. Yeah? You could engage users, yeah, in various ways. So for example, if you install a new system, you could send a message to an app on a phone, are you too hot or are you too cold? Because the system is still trying to optimize, okay? And after a while, when you're not getting any discomfort messages, the system can work out actually we probably got there, okay? But you might need thermostat in each room to actually talk to the system, because you might need to optimize each rooms individually. Some people might want 25, some people might want 18 degrees, Yeah, so you can't really set the same comfort level for the whole house and expect everybody to be happy. So there is a lot of learning to be had, and also a lot of infrastructure on a domestic level to be introduced. You can use thermal mass of each building to lower energy costs. How does that happen? Well, each building can actually hold heat for some time. Yeah? A hot water cylinder can hold heat for some time. You can use that to your advantage. So if, for example, you know that peak time wholesale energy prices are going to be £200 per megawatt hour, but only 3 hours earlier, it's £20 per megawatt hour, you could time shift your electricity to heat conversion and use the thermal mass that you've learned from each particular house to optimize that. Yeah? And this is how you can start driving value forward, because you're reducing the cost of conversion from electricity to heat. And this is where you can find all those little helpers to reduce the cost of heat. Okay? You can use user engagement. So if you think about, I mean, people have talked about gamification, and then Bitcoin arrived and we all forgot about it. You can actually achieve quite a lot of user engagement if you gamify this, right? So you can say things like, just an example, you can bet your house on the grid, yeah? And by using return from, let's say, load shifting or frequency response, you can gain some extra income. Well, you don't have to call it energy savings or cost savings, because people fall asleep the moment you mention that. But if you talk about extra income or something that can then offset your energy cost, people get engaged. And you can say, okay, what level of discomfort would you like? You know, do you want to win big but with big risk, or do you want to win small but with very little discomfort? People can actually engage in this, and you can use homes in aggregate to do frequency response. Yeah, so when we've got lots of wind blowing overnight, and there is not much particular consumption, you can actually, you know, as a service provider, you can get paid to consume electricity. Yeah, you can use buildings, thermal mass, and a hot water cylinder to store the heat until it's needed, while getting free or paid for electricity from National Grid. At the same time, when you've got peak consumption, you might withhold conversion from electricity to grid for a set time, and then depending how risky the people feel, you can withhold it for a bit more, or you can withhold it for a bit less. But you could use that thermal mass, you can use the inertia of the hot water cylinder to actually manage the grid actively. And all of a sudden, the whole shift to electric heating seems to be a big help when it comes to managing the grid, as opposed to a massive hindrance. It starts looking at as value generation process as opposed to additional cost. So by redefining those points, you can achieve quite a lot. And that's pretty much my final point. Yes. So there you go, decentralized heat as service or comfort as service, and few bits about how we can achieve that. Thank you.